All right, we're gonna continue on. This is gonna be part 6 of this contact report. Boy, this one is well. I guess it took Billy 30 some hours to do this. So yeah, if we spend 5 or 6 hours, that's probably normal. Okay. Um, Part number 6. Ptaah, you evoke astonishing emotions in me, for your words correspond to the exact facts of truth. You have become very wise. Billy, that is your opinion. Many human beings who know me say of me that I am a fantasist and that I live far from the truth. Ptaah, I am well aware of that, but I also know that only such human beings claim this of you who are biased by religious heresies or who move in unreal and false free-thinking paths and deny the existence of the creation in its true being. In this respect, you will also have to make your experiences again shortly, when you are again accused of lying and untruthfully accused of consistently denying and rejecting other UFO contact people. So he's put down a whole bunch of contact people that swear they've been, they're star seeds and they've been talking to Venusians and Martians and all these other people. Billy Semjase says they're crap. They're full of baloney. They're just trying to make money. So, okay, Billy, that is snappy. Who is going to initiate this again? Ptaah, you have known about this for about 20 years. You will come across it again early on. Presently, it has slipped from your memory. Billy, so you do not want to talk about it? Well, let us leave it. But now another question. Recently, it was explained to me that in various governments of our Earth, extraterrestrial intelligences are carrying on their activities and are even permanently employed there. What is this all about? Can we believe these statements? Ptaah, you call such things fairy tales. Billy, so this means that there are no star people working in our Earth governments? Ptaah, that is what it says. If these statements were true, then peace would have come to Earth a long time ago, and earthly humanity would have been taught the truth by the governments. But since we extraterrestrial life forms, according to our directives, have no right to interfere forcibly in earthly affairs, we must confine ourselves to the form of selecting predetermined Earth humans for this purpose, in order to be able to transmit our knowledge through them. If we had the right to interfere in the form of being allowed to act in government offices, then we could also show ourselves in public. I would then also not have to worry about being harmed by governments, the military, criminals, etc. Furthermore, it would also be impossible for us, in terms of swinging waves, to get involved with Earth humans in a direct or personal manner, because we would lose our control over ourselves. For very specific reasons, you are an exception, as you yourself know very well. Billy, but it is said that these extraterrestrials would secretly and undetectedly participate in or with government agencies. Ptaah, this is also not so, which your logic itself can confirm. If it were really so, then within only a few days, no authority, no government, and no military power would hunt down our ships, because we actually have all possibilities to nip such things in the bud. If we were to be active in any governmental bodies, there would be peace on Earth. So, all the claims are nothing more than lies. I mean, when such things are claimed by us or by any other extraterrestrials. Such lies are often due to religious machinations of some sectarian elements and of unscrupulous fantasists, liars, swindlers, and frauds. Billy, well, that is a tough one. Man, oh man. Ptaah, But it is true. Unfortunately, however, it is precisely the truth that is often twisted by religious sectarians and fantasists and evaluated in their own favor. That is why there are also various groups that are supposedly concerned with the explanation of things to do with us and our ships, but who in reality only use this as a pretext to consolidate and spread their religious sectarianism in order to thereby beat the world even worse into religious bondage. Billy, can you be a little more specific about that? Like, what kind of groups are they? Ptaah, you will find out about this yourself through one of these groups in the near future. Billy, so secretive. Are you really not going to say anything? Ptaah, no. Billy, also good. Then I would like to know something else for once. I have heard and read that our scientists are trying to make their own earthly beam ships. Is that true, and how advanced are these things? Ptaah, this information is consistent with the truth to the extent that such flying apparatuses are in their infancy of being built on the Earth. However, they are not beam ships, but flying machines similar to our ships, equipped only with explosion engines or more recently with jet engines with recoil effect. The construction of such ships on Earth in modern times is not entirely new, however, for the first ships of this kind were completed in planning and construction as early as 1941. In mid-February 1945, the first flights were carried out up to altitudes of around 12,500 meters, developing speeds of just over 2,000 kilometers per hour. It was all commissioned by the Führer of the Second World War, Adolf Hitler. At the end of the war, however, everything was destroyed so that it would not fall into the hands of the enemy. Various plans and devices and apparatuses, however, were overlooked and fell into other hands. From these, various groups developed the disc-shaped ships of terrestrial origin that exist today. These flying discs, as they are called by the designers, naturally require their test flights to test their properties, etc. Many of these objects can therefore be observed by Earth humans as they are flown about to be flown in or tested. The largest of these terrestrial flying objects of this type already reach nearly 10 meters in diameter. That's 30 feet. And are already quite numerous. Of course, this is quite vigorously denied by the governments of the states possessing them. However, their machines have often crashed because they are still rather poorly developed in all respects. But the uninitiated human beings of Earth live in the mistaken belief that these flying discs they observe are of the same kind as our beam ships and come from extraterrestrial worlds. Billy, so that is how it is. Then several of the UFOs observed around the world are not UFOs at all, but simply terrestrial flying discs. Ptaah, that is so, yes. Often they are forced to make emergency landings because their construction, devices, and apparatus are still very inadequate. Their explosion engines, which means like internal combustion, I'm guessing, their explosion engines and jet engines, which they recently also want to operate atomically, but which are still wishes for the future, very often cause combustion damage. Human beings who come into the vicinity of some combustion fires are so often also threatened by dangers of atomic radiation, starting from experimental atomic reactors, which are supposed to serve for propulsion, but which will not succeed for a long time yet. If distressed ships of this kind are approached by observers, by which I mean that they go near them, then they are often frightened by the occupants, or even abducted and deported, in order to ensure their absolute silence. Such occurrences are unfortunately not uncommon on the Earth, but through the ignorance of human beings and the various unreal enlightenment-striving groups, they are invariably attributed to extraterrestrial life forms. In truth, there are probably also malignant intelligences from outer space that haunt your Earth or stray there, but there are not so many of them that they would be of great significance. Most observations of flying discs with human predations are of terrestrial origin. Earth humans should be aware of this when they encounter any flying discs, whose occupants are well aware of the fact that very many human beings believe these objects to be of extraterrestrial origin. This knowledge is also very often exploited by them by imagining some gullible Earth humans as extraterrestrial intelligences. Aware of their religious power, they also do not shy away from pretending to be angels or God's messengers and appearing as saviors of Earth humans, whereby they can proclaim the gullible, deceived ones to be contactees and assign them mysterious missions which are supposedly for the benefit of Earth humans, but which in reality only serve their own profit and the benefit of their own country's espionage. The most popular places of origin these malevolent, deceptive elements and occupants of earthly flying discs name are Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. But also the nearest neighboring systems of your solar system have to serve for this, as well as the Pleiades, in the coming time when you will have become world famous through your contacts with us. In the process, my daughter Semjase and my person will also be falsely accused of being contact beings with Earth humans who are fraudulent in this respect, as well as alleged Pleiades beings who do not exist. He says Pleiades do not exist because the Pleiades system is not habitable for life. The stars are still blue stars, and they put off too much ultraviolet radiation, and it would kill anything on the planets. These people are not from Pleiades. They're Pleiadian as opposed to Pleiadian. Anyway, Billy, you amaze me, Ptaah. I have known all these things since my childhood. Even Svath and Asket told me these things, but I was always strictly enjoined to keep silent about them and not to let them become revealed under any circumstances. But now you are also explaining them to me again, knowing that Semjase will tell me everything later, because I'm supposed to write it all down. Or are these things excluded and not transmitted later? Do I have to continue keep quiet about it? Ptaah, the time of having to keep silent is very far advanced. The time of having to keep silent is very far advanced, which is why you have also received permission from Asket to reveal everything now. As it is also so with this knowledge. The time is ripe, so you are also allowed to name this knowledge, and your duty of silence becomes invalid. Semjase will therefore convey my explanations to you verbatim. But now, our time here is also over, and we prepare for the first leap. They're still on the Great Spacer, way out on the other end of the universe. Billy, I thank you for all your explanations, Ptaah. Now, where are we actually going? Ptaah, since through our technology all distances have become of absolute insignificance, we can leap here and there, once closer to Earth, then again much farther away. The order is unimportant. Anyway, we will show you some very important and very interesting things. Okay, and this is continuation of the 31st contact report from the trip with Semjase on 17 July. Parentheses. Since the transitional phases and the transmissions have always remained the same phenomena, I will not have to describe them in the future. I am content to put down on paper the thoughts and explanations, etc. So I will leave out the unimportant things and only write down the actually valuable transmissions of Semjase. That is to say, I simply omit all those descriptions which deal with the entry and exit of the transmission, for no new data have arisen for me in this respect. Consequently, I could not make any other observations. This was a statement of Tuesday, 16 September 1975. Okay, Billy, what is that enormous structure in front of you? It seems like a gigantic wall in the middle of space. And there's a picture here, but it doesn't show much. Ptaah, that is the former star and planet system Nesar. Nesar? It is a dead system, destroyed by the unreasonableness of its former inhabitants. What you call a wall there are many planets and stars that crashed into each other and created this unique structure. In the mass of these dead worlds, you still recognize some faint light phenomena. These are the destroyed stars, which they still have a weak luminosity and lose it very slowly. This system is 1.73 billion light years away from your homeworld, and despite this great distance, the cause of this destruction is to be found on Earth. Huh? The inhabitants of the Nesar system, the Nesariner, were a technically and consciously very highly developed people, and they formed a uniform race of humanoid form. For a period of 17,000 years, they lived in complete peace with each other and with the races of the other systems known to them in their galaxy. Their consciousness-based and technological evolution was very high, but unfortunately only in the knowledge of the use of their powers of consciousness. They did not possess a spiritual zeal in and of itself, and they also had no knowledge of the creation. So they knew about their spirit, and they had great spiritual powers, but they didn't know about the creation. Okay. All their spiritual knowledge rested solely in the partial recognition and observance of the laws of nature. According to these, they acted correctly, but were unable to attain any spiritual zeal. By omitting the most important factor of creation, they remained one-sided and exposed to the danger of being led into confusion by unreal consciousness matters. This danger was very great, and it grew constantly because the Nesarines moved very far away from their galaxy in terms of research and came into contact with intelligences which were completely foreign to them and which imparted to them very foreign forms of thought and teachings as well as philosophies. As long as these were still compatible with the laws of nature, everything went well. But then it happened that 3 expedition ships of the Nesarines strayed into the Sol system through a faulty leap in hyperspace and found human life forms on Earth. That was exactly 1,067 years ago in Earth time. Very similar to Earth humans, they mingled with them and lived together with them for about 50 years, unrecognized and very interested in all earthly things. In particular, their attention fell on the religions dominating the Earth humans. With their highly developed technical possibilities, they collected everything attainable concerning the religions known to them, stored them in their apparatus, and allowed themselves to be very strongly influenced by them. They got caught up in religions. Since their consciousness was only oriented toward natural law, but not also toward the creation, they very quickly found a false sense in the various earthly religions, but they became just as unaware of the faults as Earth humans. They now saw another zeal and eagerly endeavored to strive towards it. The religious influence thus gained by the Earth humans appeared to them to be of unusually great significance and importance. So they set out to find their home galaxy again, which they actually succeeded in doing after 4 long years of wandering about, to the chagrin of their whole and truly great home system and its inhabitants. The religions learned on earth were spread and taught on all inhabited worlds, while a small armada of great spacers was sent to Earth to collect further data of the religions prevailing there. During 5 years, research was carried out in secret on Earth, and everything to do with the religions was registered. Then the expedition returned to the home galaxy. Once there, the expedition members discovered that various changes had taken place in the meantime. Houses of worship had been built on all worlds, and the human beings had become discontented. Despite these findings, the new data was evaluated and disseminated, and within another 50 years, the entire great system was under the influence of various earthly religions. Human beings could no longer understand each other, and anyone of a different faith was accused of unreal teachings. Soon these insults led to evil accusations, to quarrels, and then to hatred. Families among themselves divided into different religious groups and beliefs, and then soon the first blood flowed. The family members began to fight and kill each other, and soon it was family against family. This spread to housing estates and whole residential areas, and suddenly it was everyone against everyone. What you call a civil war ensued after another 7 years. The high councils were completely powerless against this because organizations such as the military, which could have brought order, were unknown in the whole Nessar system. In sudden realization of the madness of the religions brought in from the earth, the rulers banned them. But it was already too late. The civil wars had already escalated into world wars, and soon the first worlds were destroyed. After another 3 years, a vicious system-wide war of annihilation was underway, with the centers, the suns, being destroyed. Collapsing in on themselves, they tore into all the planetary systems with irresistible gewalt. A gigantic mass arose which took over everything that still existed. Eventually, the planets and stars were pulled into a whole heap and joined the huge mass. This is how the enormous structure you see there came into being. A destroyed solar and planetary system of enormous proportions caused by religious madness, brought in as a deadly form from the earth. Now this is why they are so down on religions, because it can trash everything. The whole Nessar system got destroyed. They treat it like a virus. They don't want us going out in space and bringing our religions with us, because it'll just continue. Anyway, Billy, well, that was madness, all right. Semjase, sure. Now pay attention far out there. That is a black hole in the universe. A black hole in the universe is very dangerous. Such a black hole is a gigantic gravitational pull of immense proportions in empty space. The formation of such a hole in empty space is very easy to explain. Somewhere, for example, there is a sun which suddenly collapses due to violent internal processes. All external and also system-wide mass falls inwards into the center, where it is compressed with unimaginable gewalt. The result is that the mass of matter becomes so dense that a single thimbleful of this material suddenly weighs many thousands of tons. Even an elephant would not be able to carry a single tiny speck of dust. The space of the collapsed masses can no longer be filled by the already empty space, so a vacuum within a vacuum is created. The mass that is concentrated in itself, however, pulls everything into itself that enters the area of attraction of the whole or strays into it. As a result, the mass continues to grow and becomes larger. Such a hole can also be created artificially. This was also the case in this destroyed system. But before the process had reached its climax, the first worlds already fell into the hole that was in process. Thus, only the first were destroyed in their structure and form, while those following the first were able to retain their outer form. Thus, the process of whole formation was stopped short of its climax, and only the gigantic and powerful attraction of the whole mass was able to pull the remaining planets and stars into itself. But now, the next leap is already prepared, and we are about to transmit. We're about to jump. Ptaah. Here we are again, much further away from Earth than before. The distance to your home system is now 1,960,000,000 light years. So 1,960 million light years from Earth. This is the galaxy ASAP. And over there, you see the world Desom, D-E-S-O-M. It is a world inhabited by human forms according to your time and values, living approximately in the Middle Ages. They live in larger villages similar to those you have in the Oriental world. A second race from this world does not live in permanent houses. It is nomadic and builds huts out of plants and bushes. You can see this world up close because Semjase will take you there with her beam ships. But first, notice the giant sun up ahead. Its power is already diminished and will be extinguished in a few tens of millennia. The moon you see there is about 4 times the size of the Earth's moon. In about 3.2 million years, it will crash into the giant sun as the 3 bodies slowly work their way towards each other. Billy, and what happens to the human beings there? Semjase, they will have developed technology useful to them by then, which will allow them the possibility of escape from their world. Billy, and if that is not the case? Semjase, but it will be. If this were prevented by any events, then help would be brought to them from outside. This is arranged according to cosmic laws. Billy, that is reassuring. But how is it now? Can we talk to the human beings down there? Semjase, I am afraid that will not be possible on any of the worlds we will be visiting in the next few hours. Everywhere it is appropriate not to let us be seen, so we have to wrap ourselves in our protective shields. We must only allow ourselves to be seen where the evolution in question and our directives permit. Billy, it is a great pity, but I understand. Semjase, that is good. Now come on. In parentheses, the excursion only lasts a few minutes, during which I can take several photos. Already we are heading back to Ptaah. We are heading back, and Ptaah initiates the next transmission, the next hyperspace jump. Ptaah, here we are 1,780,000,000 light years away from the Earth in the galaxy Nippon. What you see there is the system LISA, L-E-S-A. You see there the 3 big formations. The 2 there, standing so close together, are the 2 sisters planets of immense size. The one a little further away and even bigger is the giant moon of the sister worlds. It is about 5.24 times bigger than the Earth. Billy, fabulous. Semjase, that is absolutely normal. Only to Earth humans and other non-spacefaring races do these things seem fabulous, as you call it. Your scientists cannot even imagine such giant worlds in their wildest dreams. The truth is beyond their comprehension. Not anymore, because it's in the contact reports. Sorry. Billy, I do not doubt it. Semjase, come now. We will also take a short flight on these worlds. Parentheses. Again, I was able to take some photos and hope they turned out well. Explanation from the 15th September 1975. One of the 2 LISA worlds is inhabited by human life forms. After the next hyperleap. Ptaah, this one above us is an oxygen world similar in size to Earth. The atmosphere also has similar values, while the planet's surface only bears some resemblance to your deserts, and in many factors has much more similarity to the planet Venus of your system. Here we are still in the Lisa system, Lesa, which has very large dimensions and must be traversed with hyperleaps. The planet shows very primitive faunal life and already again strong floral growth, but was once very lively in former times. However, a cosmic event destroyed everything again and caused everything to fossilize in a process lasting millions of years. For several millennia now, however, conditions have changed again and new life is developing. As you can see from here, different colors shimmer there. These are deserts, water, and forest areas. The desert-like landscapes are partly made up of rock masses, mountains, and very rotten brittle rock, which slowly decomposes back into sand and then turns into earth over time. The mountains themselves are no higher than 8,000 meters, and they are very similar to the mountains of your Venus. But you will see that for yourself when you are there with Semjase. You will also be able to take photographs through the open access hatch because the atmosphere is very good for all of us. Billy, then I am sure the photos will be better too. Askett has explained that the grid device is not very useful. In connection with this Earth-Venus-like planet, however, I now have a question. Invisible and spiritual life forms are supposed to live on such worlds, for example, also on our Venus and on Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Mars, etc. In addition to these, there are also so-called space people or space beings, or whatever they are called. All these forms, however, are said to be in contact with Earth humans, etc., here and there, or even frequently. They are also said to call themselves guardians, universe guardians, angels of God, etc., etc., and to be, so to speak, the guardians of divine laws and universal order. I am now not clear whether these statements are only assertions or correspond to actual facts. To be honest, I can see neither sense nor logic in it. I think that this even contradicts all creational laws and the laws of nature. Somehow, I have the feeling that such claims are unreal and spring from delusional, overloaded, sick brains. I am not quite sure about this, though. It is really just a hunch and a feeling inside of me that gives me this view. I just cannot get my head around it. Not even those people keep trying to explain. Not even though people keep trying to explain to me that my assumption is not correct and that these space people or space beings are supposed to really exist. There are even supposed to be forms of guardians that exist in empty space, and so on. What should I really make of this? I cannot accept the whole thing. Ptaah, how did you come to these things? Did you read books about it? Billy, no, to the best of my knowledge, I have never seen or read such books. I have simply been told on various occasions about these supposed space beings and space people, many of whom are supposed to be purely spiritual forms. However, my feelings and logics simply cannot be reconciled with this. Ptaah, then you feel and think very correctly. You know about parapsychology, as you call this field of knowledge. Billy, I hope so. At least I have ... Semjase, he has extraordinary abilities, as I have recently discovered. He also possesses quite enormous knowledge, as you yourself know very well. Ptaah, your excessive modesty is not good. In this, strive for more truthful forms, for the existing ones already border on self-denial. You have already been told this several times. You know a guy named George Adamski, right? Billy, you know him? You have told me about him several times. I also know him personally from before when he was at the Volkshaus in Zurich in May of 1959. I did not get the best impression of him then, although I had to talk to him with an interpreter because I did not speak English at that time. I noticed, however, that the man was dominated by a tremendous stubbornness and by a great egoism that seemed unusual to me, but which was supposed to be covered up by an almost perfectly acted kindness and charity. I found that the man had an extraordinary gift for persuasion and suggestion and always knew how to take over the conversation. It was clear that he had fallen for an ideal and was exploiting it in his own favor with a feigned help for the oppressed. So also fighting injustice seemed to me to be only acted by him and everything only to put himself in the center. It seemed to me that in the first and last place for him, only his own needs were always predominant, and that from the big toe up to the last tip of his hair, I had the impression at the time that in every respect he was only ever concerned with his own ego and his own well-being, which he directed into the highest channels through a tremendous power of imagination and suggestion. He also seemed to me to be dominated by the will to want to be the first in every relationship and also want to take the lead in every relationship. Ptaah, you have observed and analyzed the man very carefully, which apparently no earth human being has ever been able to do before. Adamski indeed showed the qualities you mentioned, but he managed to cover them up almost perfectly and thereby deceived countless human beings. He was born under the sign of Aries and degenerated in a very negative manner. The reason, however, why I am again calling your attention to this man and to parapsychology is this. The space beings you mentioned do not exist in any form, and they are only the Oscarati fantasy product of your impossible parapsychology in the first place. In the second place, in this fantasy Ausartung functions the aforementioned Adamski. He lived in a hopeless web of lies and was a fantasist with extraordinarily high developed powers of suggestion. Until a few years ago, your unreal parapsychology party spoke of space beings of your mentioned form. Adamski took over this form for himself and imaginatively created a special form of being out of them, namely the universe guardians, etc. Neither parapsychology nor Adamski also get to the heart of the truth. Beings of the forms they mention are absolutely non-existent. They have never existed, nor will they ever exist. They are the pure fantasy product of overstimulated, misguided, or sick brains. But on the other hand, they are also implanted fantasy products of the Giza intelligences addicted to world domination. The Giza intelligences, they were a splinter group of the Pleiadian people that wanted to take over the earth by religious means and by implanting thoughts into their heads, and they implanted thoughts into politicians' heads, etc., etc. They were highly developed, but they were bad guys. They've recently been removed from the earth. I don't know about recently, but they've been removed from the earth. Okay. The truth about the most diverse forms of beings rests in completely different values than are claimed by your parapsychology, by Adamski and various other Earth humans. But these entities have not a single iota in common with the aforementioned fantasy space beings. The truth is that invisible and unrecognizable forms of beings live in the most diverse spheres and dimensions. These are spheres and dimensions that are superimposed on or subordinate to your normal time and that form independent spheres and space-time planes. In and of themselves, these spheres and dimensions, and likewise the life forms or being forms that animate them, are of as material a nature as the Earth human beings, their world, and their time plane. The swinging waves of the time planes concerned are, however, structurally, fundamentally displaced, whereby these other spheres, dimensions, and forms of life or beings remain invisible and unrecognizable to the Earth human being. The swinging wave spheres, far inferior to Earth humans, are just as invisible and unrecognizable to them as the spheres far superior to them. If this were not so, the most diverse spheres, dimensions, and life forms would flow into each other and cause universal chaos. Fundamentally, nothing at all could exist as a result. So, there must be sharp dividing lines to ensure the existence of spheres, dimensions, and entities. Now, these others are the being forms or life forms from other spheres and dimensions, which are just as material in their time plane as Earth humans are in their space-time structure, also have their worries and problems, and they too are classified in the cosmic course of evolution. In no wise are they interested in making contact with the time plane which is yours and means the normal time plane for you. On the other hand, also in various other spheres and dimensions, only very few life forms are capable of opening time barriers and penetrating other spheres, just as this is not the case on Earth. In other spheres and dimensions, then, the beings or life forms are just as material as they are on Earth, except that they are invisible and unrecognizable to you through the swinging wave displacements. But there are still the high spiritual planes, the purely spiritual spheres and dimensions. These, however, are no longer material in any form known to you, but are purely spiritual. This means, then, that in these spheres and dimensions there live only beings who are released from the material body and vibrate towards the goal of relative perfection. These are partly the beings which already in the highest planes begin to direct the destinies of the universe in harmony with the creation and are capable of creating. But these entities also do not make contact with Earth humans. This only happens in certain exceptional cases which are very rarely repeated in millennia of time. Then lower beings capable of communication are addressed by higher purely spiritual life forms and made aware of certain happenings. Without exception, however, this only occurs in connection with the appearance of a life form at some place in a sphere and dimension which has a mission to fill as a prophet, etc. He's talking about Billy. And such prophets exist in all spheres and dimensions, that is, not only on Earth. These are life forms who are concerned to further develop the great masses of their own kind, and who have to show them the path of the whole evolution. So there's prophets in other dimensions as well. Prophets in other spheres and... Okay. Such prophets, however, are without exception brought forth by destiny of their own, and are chosen by much more highly developed life forms and prepared for their mission from birth. If they are then sufficiently developed, then contact is made with the higher and purely spiritual plane, Arahat Atharsata, by a grand council decision, which already consists of semi-spiritual life forms. From this plane, the prophets are then further instructed in spiritual knowledge, and the teaching of the Spirit is also transmitted to them for propagation. But truly, only life forms are capable of this communication with the higher and first pure spiritual plane, which in and of themselves are already semi-spiritual or semi-material or otherwise spiritually very highly developed. Among our peoples, this is embodied in the High Council, whereas we ourselves are not yet capable of this communication. These spirit forms of high and highest planes are to be calculated in terms of age with many billions and not only with millions of years, during which they have lived through innumerable incarnations and have evolved to the highest states. This fact also proves the incorrectness of Earth humans' assertions that a Wesson of 10 or 20 million years of age is already of pure spiritual form and is considered a master. Many misguided or deceitful Earth humans speak or write again and again of spirit beings who are said to be several million years old and to communicate with Earth humans. These alleged spirit beings are called masters, gurus, and perfects, etc. by the claimants. In this respect, it is very interesting for you to note to Earth humans such concepts of time of some millions of years seems monstrous and incomprehensible. That is, such concepts of time can no longer be measurably grasped and processed by Earth humans. If, therefore, in writings and books, such dates of years and times appears, it is of complete certainty that these dates can only come from very ignorant Earth humans, for only to Earth humans, speaking of your world, do these periods of time appear inconceivable and monstrous. Earth humans, who are still bound to their world in every respect and have only taken the beginning baby steps towards space travel, are not yet able to grasp tremendously long periods of time and distances conceptually. You will experience this fact for yourself. When on return from this journey, you will name the distances we have covered. So when Earth humans give time references of a few million years, which are supposed to correspond to the age of some time and spirit forms, and which are supposedly connected with them, then these references only correspond to their own small-minded intellect, for they are not able to grasp the truth of timeless endlessness. They are unable to imagine the truth of reality, and so in their inadequate reports they state an age of alleged spirit forms which are supposed to be very highly developed, which is deeply below the age of any averagely developed half-spirit being. The average developed spirit form, parentheses, of an Earth human being already has an age of over 2.8 million years. So he's saying that the average person on the Earth, their spirit's been around for over 2.8 million years. It took him or her this time to develop from absolute ignorance through many incarnations to the present spiritual and consciousness-based level. So he's saying the average person on Earth is about 2.8 million years old. Accordingly, a life form of only 1 or 2 million years of age is in a rather low and inferior state of development, which occur according to spiritual and consciousness values must be called still very low and underdeveloped. With a total age of only 1 or 2 million years, logically and according to the laws of creation, only that stage has developed where a life form becomes conscious of normal and conscious thinking. This makes it absolutely impossible for any life form, so also for Earth humans, that such Wesson can contact higher forms in an instructive manner. Masters and perfects, etc., with 10 or 20 million years of age represent only the absolute fantasy of misguided or deceitful life forms. This also makes it clear that if an earth human being speaks of a master, etc., of 10 or 20 million years of age having communicated with him or her, that this is quite simply untruth, to say the least. He's bull crap. According to the laws of the creation and according to the reality of all time planes, such a master, guru, or perfect one must have an age of 40 to 60 million years in order to be able to be divested of the material body at all. This, however, does not mean that this Wesson has already achieved relative perfection, because until then, 60 to 80 billion years are necessary until the pure spiritual incarnation into the plane of Arahat Atharsata, because also in the semi-spiritual and pure spiritual realms the creational laws are the same, since becoming and passing determine the course of evolution. The duration of 60 to 80 billion years is wrong, because the correct duration should be 60 to 80 million years. Okay, let's go back over that again. This, however, does not mean that the Wesson has already reached relative perfection, because until then, 60 to 80 million years are necessary until the pure spiritual incarnation into the plane of Arahat Atharsata, because also in the semi-spiritual and pure spiritual realms the creational laws are the same, since becoming and passing determine the course of evolution. Okay, spiritual incarnation, however, is subject to other forms and laws. That is the case with material life forms. So a life form of 10 or 20 or 100 or 300 million years of age can never correspond to the pure spiritual form of a being that is even relatively close to perfection. These levels are reached only after the incarnational course of evolution of many billions of years, which, however, without exceptions, are not less than 57 billion years. According to earthly terms, and taking the existence of earthly humans as an example, 1 or 2 million years of age with the corresponding incarnations correspond approximately to the state of a 9-month-old child after its birth. So he's calling the earth humans a bunch of babies. We are toddlers. Not even toddlers. We're just babies. We're 9 months old. So, okay. This follows logically from the fact that the whole of time is reckoned according to purely creational standards, and that these concepts of time are entirely different from those which earth humans of the present state of consciousness are able to recognize. She only reckons according to his or her earth humans' conceptualizations, which are still caught up in complete lack of understanding and do not yield any cosmic values. If a life form with 20 million years of age and incarnation had already got rid of its material body and was floating close to perfection, then the universe would have ceased to exist a long time ago, because creation would have already laid itself to rest again in fulfillment of its task. This is because time would simply work much faster in terms of evolution than the creation would be able to cope with. This would mean that the 7 great ages of the life of the creation, or the 7 eternities as you call them, would shrink to less than 10 billion years. Creation itself lives in a conscious, creating state during 7 great times. Then it lies down to slumber for as many great times in order to awake again and create again for 7 great times. Thus, it develops itself and finally perfects itself through its 7 by 7 total periods to the primordial creation, in order to then itself beget a life-stable creation, which is again devoted to exactly the same laws. A great time is called eternity with you today, true to the Christian heresies which have brought up the term eternity. Thus, earth humans today call one great time eternity, and the 7 great times eternities, 7 eternities, in which, however, the actual concept of time has been lost. The term eternity finds a completely wrong application in earthly usage because the concept of the time of this time is illogically calculated. Consequently, an eternity is not to be equated with one great time, but with 7 great times. This means that 7 times 7 great times correspond to the 7 eternities mentioned by earth humans. So the calculation is very simple. One great time is 311 trillion and 40 billion Earth years, which Earth humans equate with an eternity. But this is an enormous miscalculation, for one eternity is equal to 2 quadrillion, 177 trillion, and 280 billion years. The mathematical formula is therefore one great time equals, 311 billion, 40 million Earth years. One great time is 311 billion, 40 million Earth years. 7 great times is I don't even know that number, but it's 177 280 000 000 Earth years. 7 times 7 great times is 15240 960 000 Earth years equals an all great time. This is the creation-based time formula of the existence of the creation. Like every life form, the creation also has its course of development and evolution, except that its time values are anchored in very high values. If a human being lives, for example, 50 or 100 years of an incarnation life, then this means for the creation comparatively a time of about 44 trillion years, during which it passes through 7 by 7 evolutionary stages. The approximately 44 trillion years represents a small time, 7 by 7, of which adds up to a large time. As a comparison, Earth humans live an average of 70 years, then pass away as material life forms in order to incarnate again as material life forms at a later time. For him or her, each life lived means passing through a certain stage of evolution until they have acquired a certain spiritual level. Compared to the times of the creation, this spiritual level can be called a great time. The course of evolution of the material life form can be calculated in 7 times 7, as in the case of the creation itself. To reach a higher spiritual level, the life form must pass through 7 stages of evolution. 7 levels are in the value of the whole, so 7 different spiritual levels must be worked out. When this is done, then a relative perfection is reached, after which the relatively spiritualized form enters into the creation. Each spiritual level, however, is divided into 7 sub-levels, as I have already explained. Explained a little more simply, this is called a material life form has to live through 7 sub-levels of evolution in order to reach the next higher level, main level. Such levels are in turn their 7, which are each divided into 7 evolutionary sub-levels, which thus gives the values 7 times 7 as a prerequisite, equals 7 main levels, 7 sub-levels, 7 times 49 further sub-levels, which are again multiplied 7-fold. Note Billy. The years of material and then of spiritual life forms are to be reckoned in their evolution in many millions and billions of years up to relative perfection, while the time of the creation itself is, of course, many times greater. Thus, the creation does not only go through millions and billions of years for the fulfillment of its evolution in a great time, but many trillions of years. A sublevel or small time is thus about 44 trillion years, during which time it evolves upwards through 7 such periods to the next higher level. It too, like the material life forms, has 7 plateaus or major times, which are subdivided into subtimes or substages of the same number. If the life forms ultimately enter into the creation itself as perfection, then it evolves further into relative perfection and perfection within itself, and after passing through the 7 by 7 great times, becomes the primordial creation and begets a new creation out of this form. Your Christian calendar is very faulty in all things, so also in the calculation of the great times. Due to the errors that have arisen, the whole creation life of all 7 by 7 great times has been calculated with only looks like 2 trillion years. 2,177,280,000,000 years. Which in truth does not correspond to 7 great times, but only to 1 great time. But this gave rise to the earth-human mathematical calculation that the universe would only exist for 2 quadrillion, 177 trillion, and 280 billion years before it would be transformed again into non-being through the 7-period slumber of the creation during 7 by 7 great times. Are you getting all this? Yeah, I gotta say, I'm not getting it all. But we'll keep reading. Such calculation errors are very common among Earth humans as well as in terms of ancient languages. Terms of linguistic designations and numerical values, however, are precisely very important for the calculation of very many things. So also, every letter of your language alphabets has a certain numerical value according to which you can calculate everything. If Earth humans paid more attention to these things, they would recognize many dangerous false teachings. In particular, you could calculate the things of your religions and recognize the false teachings from them. Consider the information in the New Testament where you find the prophecy under the name Revelation, chapter 13, verse 18, which describes the malicious suppression and fighting of the spiritual teaching by the values 666. This number represents the value of a calculation of the teaching of numerology that you received from Ascot back in 1956. With regard to the number 666, we know very well that the earthly Christian religions associate it with a so-called Antichrist. This, however, is a malicious falsification of the facts, for this number does not have the meaning of the destruction of Christianity, but the meaning of the destruction of the truth that was spread by Emmanuel about 2,000 years ago. So the number 666 refers to anti-truth and to the destruction of truth, as well as to material and purely worldly things. Christianity itself bears this number arising from the designations God, Jesus, and Christ. These names, according to your values, contain in themselves deadly annihilation and destruction and complete eradication of truth and the creational spiritual teaching. Along with other earthly cultic religions, Christianity is at the forefront with the absolute numerical value of annihilation, destruction, and extermination of truth with the number 666. If you now trace the emergence of this religion, you will find that the Christ religion was brought into being in a year of the number 666, namely in the year 189 of your calendar. This year gives a basic number with a tendency to destruction, annihilation, and extinction, namely 18. The triple value results in 666. The birthday of the Christian religion was therefore already marked by destruction, annihilation, and extermination of the truth. If you continue to follow the dates, you will find that in every year with the triple value 666, the Christian religion planned or carried out a new bloody crime that cost the lives of countless and innocent human beings. In many cases, these crimes look like political machinations, but the truth is that the Christian religion, in particular in cooperation with other religions and with politics, is the main culprit. Almost in regular succession, the Christian religion has thus struck every 10 years since its foundation in 189. Christian religion was founded in the year 189, and they say it's made trouble every 10 years since then. For the truth-loving human being, the truth must finally break through, and he must realize that Christianity is the bestial beast of destruction, annihilation, and extermination of truth. Christianity embodies the beast with the number 666, and it is already on the point of destroying the truth and wisdom of the spiritual teaching and the teaching of the creation with such deadly gewalt as has never been the case before. Emmanuel was already aware of the coming of this time of error, and so he refused to be called God, Jesus, or Christ, which was nevertheless officially done in 189. Emmanuel himself was aware of the teaching of numerology, and he also knew the future. In sorrow, he well knew that he was unable to change anything, and so his objection to his later designation remained only a conscious attempt on his part to change what was to come. The designations God, Jesus, and Christ alone contain dangerous values, for each of these designations embodies death, ruin, and destruction. In particular, however, all three contain the triple value 666, the number of the extinction of truth. This, however, is to be concealed from earth humans, and falsifying and lying earthly number experts want to see other values in the names of Christ and God. But their teachings are lies and deceit, and they only serve evil and the eradication of truth. It should be known to you that Revelation also speaks of a servant of destruction and annihilation, of a human being who slavishly serves the very might of destruction, annihilation, and the eradication of truth. This human being also carries the number of the destruction, annihilation, and extinction of truth in his name value. His base number is 9, and his triple value is 666. He has been living on earth for many years, and in accordance with Providence, also made his appearance in a year with the destruction number 9 and the triple value 666. All his names, as well as also the name of his organization, are marked by the destruction number 9 and by the extinction number of truth in the triple value 666. Billy, I have already been given these details by Ask It once, but can they really be relied upon? Semjase, sure, but it will not be that the human being bearing the number 666 will be the actual destroyer, annihilator, or exterminator of truth. Billy, that is clear to me. Ptaah has also said that in a somewhat paraphrased form. The human being bearing the number 666 is, so to speak, only the instigator and the slave of the actual work. The might with the number 666, on the other hand, is embodied in the Christian religion. Semjase, Sure, you have understood it very well. Now come, for we want to go down to this world. And in parentheses, another hyperleap. Ptaah, what you see ahead is a stellar enclave of the galaxy Mara. It is the system Taro and 15,000 million light years away from your home. So that would be 15 trillion light years from home. Most of the worlds in this system are blue in color, which you can see when you go there with Semjase. These worlds are all still alive with volcanic activity, and only a few million years will the first life begin to develop on them at all, if at all. A few minutes later, on one of the volcanic worlds. Billy, what is that down there, Semjase? It seems to me to be a flying object. Are there any inhabited worlds around here? Semjase, sure, it is a flying apparatus, but its origin is strange to me. I will try to get in touch with it. Parentheses, Semjase is busy with various of her apparatuses and also speaks into a device in a melodic language that is incomprehensible and completely foreign to me. Apparently, however, there is no success. Billy, are you getting any contact? Semjase, my attempts are not responding. My attempts are not responding. They must be life forms that do not have intergalactic communication. Billy, aha. But what language were you speaking earlier? I have never heard anything like that before, and it is absolutely foreign to me. Semjase, you cannot know that. It is a sign language that can be spoken. Billy, I do not understand that, but a sign language can only be drawn or painted or written by certain movements and so on. Semjase, that is not so, because sign languages can actually also be spoken. To explain this to you in more detail would take a lot of time. Billy, then we will leave that. Parentheses, after the next hyperleap. Billy, where are we now? Ptaah, this is the system ESES, E-S-E-S, in the galaxy Diran. From here, the distance to Earth is 4,480,000,000,000 light years from the Earth. This star cluster also consists only of volcanic worlds that emit their own luminosity. Despite their own luminosity, however, it is very dark on the worlds. The light only penetrates outwards, but is unable to illuminate the surface of the worlds. Billy, can I still fly there with Semjase? Ptaah, there is nothing in the way if that is what you want. Billy, I would like to photograph some volcanoes. Semjase, come on then. After the next hyperleap, in parentheses. Ptaah, that giant planet up ahead is still a lone member of the star cluster we just left. It is 3 trillion kilometers away from the star cluster itself. This planet is an ice world and 11 times bigger than the planet Saturn in your solar system. Billy, that is gigantic. But one thing I do not understand is that during the whole journey, I keep noticing that we were making hyperleaps at a run, so to speak, and that you did not care that nearby planets and stars were in danger as a result. Semjase once told me that for a hyperleap, you would have to keep a safety distance of 153 million kilometers from the nearest stars and planets so that they would not be pulled into the maelstrom of the hyperleap hole. Why are you now disregarding this precaution? Ptaah, you are deceived. With my ship, we have much better distance management capabilities. The technology of this ship allows us to neutralize time, as you know and have experienced. Through this process, it is possible for us to get the safety distance of 153 million kilometers behind us in a fraction of a second and then transmit. Billy, that does not make sense to me. There is something fishy about this. Or are you not telling me something? Ptaah, you are just relentless. On the one hand, we neutralize time to just short of the transmission point, and then on the other, we create a neutral, timeless channel in outer space through which we can then travel the short distance of 153 million kilometers in a split second. Billy, it still does not make sense to me, though. If that is the case, why do you still make hyperleaps? I think that this process should actually be easier than a hyperleap. Besides, we can talk to each other and would not be paralyzed by the transmission every time and practically thrown into eternity. So why might you make it more cumbersome? Ptaah, you are very observant and have very deep thoughts. The timeless channel is actually easier to manage than a hyperleap, but such a channel can only be created at certain distances, always taking into account the nature of the environment. The various energies of the different galaxies and systems limit the range of a timeless channel, with distances varying from 210 billion to 735 billion kilometers. Billy, aha. So then this time neutralization only takes place through purely galactic and systemic energies, which you make use of. While for the hyperleaps, you can practically use an intergalactic, or rather the most diverse universal energies. According to my calculations, these universal energies should be far superimposed on the galactic energies and, accordingly, should be sought in much higher values, or am I mistaken in that? Ptaah, you speak like a good scientist. Your figures are exactly right. Billy, I am slowly getting the hang of you, and I am beginning to understand the connections. Only I am afraid I lack the concept of technology to be able to evaluate everything. Ptaah, it is thus better, because on Earth they would try to take that knowledge away from you. Billy, again you are right. It is probably better if I keep my mouth shut and do not take too much interest in such things as I have done up to now. So, if you do not mind, I would like to ask you something else that I am very interested in. Ptaah, you know you can always ask. Billy, good then, thanks. You know, I have been interested for a long time if there are worlds and life forms in our universe that are about the same level of development as those of us human beings from Earth. Ptaah, the diversity of the creation knows no bounds. Billy, that is clear to me, and I truly think of it only in awe. Ptaah, you are very wise, and I feel within me admiration for you, for I see that these are your honest feelings. How good would your life on Earth be if many thought and felt as you do? Billy, but alas, this is not so. Earth humans prefer to be lulled by the accursed manifold heresies, and thereby alienate themselves from the truth of the glory of the creation. Ptaah, you speak very bitterly. You feel pain within you for your fellow humans. This also often makes you speak very harsh words because it allows you to hide your true emotions from your fellow human beings. Billy, why do you say that? It is true. Damn it again. It is really enough to make one howl and run away from there. Ptaah, it is the truth, but I do not want you to cause yourself pain with it.